What do these jackets and black college fraternities and sororities have to do with coal miners in South Africa? Find out next. Intro. All right, family, welcome back to our channel. I am Asad.
And I'm Adrian.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little notifications bell. As well as if you get the opportunity, please share this video on your other social media platforms. We are trying to reach that 500th subscriber. And I know we can do it. So y'all guys, please help us out. So today we have a very interesting show and a very interesting connection that we have made with South Africa and some of our Black Greek letter organizations, or better known as Black fraternities and sororities. Right?
Yes.
So let's get started. So what does South African coal miners and Black fraternities and sororities, collegiate fraternities and sororities, have to do with each other?
I'm probably like most people, nothing.
That's what most people would say. And most people would be wrong. And that's why we're doing this episode. So, you ever heard of Gumboot?
No, I've heard of gumbo.
Gumbo? Well, they're a little different. Just a little bit. So, Gumboot is a type of dance that we actually saw the dance in South Africa. You remember when they were dressed in the things and they were doing them? They had the boots on in Soweto.
Right.
Okay,
I remember
okay.
that. That was nice.
So that is called the Gumboot dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Gumboot dance originates in the late 1800s when South African mine workers who were kind of forced to work in these mines were given these rubber boots. Why were they given these rubber boots? Because the conditions in the mines were basically horrible, and they were working in wet conditions, and their feet were wet, and they're working in water. And you know what happens when your feet get wet?
Mm-hmm.
You end up with sores and infections. So instead of the European mine owners actually putting in drainage, they gave the workers these boots. So that kind of became their uniform: boots, some jeans or some overalls, maybe a bandana. And also, they were not oftentimes allowed to communicate and talk with each other. So the ingenious nature of the African kicks in. And we talked about this every time. What did they say when we were in Colombia about
how they would like braid a map route into women's hair, you know, like to escape slavery. And they had the like free areas where Maroons would go, people runaway slaves would go.
Blanket.
Right. They would braid it, and the braid would be like a map route. The way that they braided their hair.
Africans in South America once again drew from that ancient knowledge, supposedly creating roadmaps or signals to freedom through elaborate cornrow patterns. There's some speculation that an enslaved African named Benkos, who formed a Maroon community of former enslaved people, used cornrows as a way to relay messages and identify landmarks for freedom.
Or even on the plantation in the United States, when African Americans were singing spirituals, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Coming for to Carry Me Home," and you know the white slave masters like, "Oh, listen to those Negroes sing," not realizing that it's a message that, you know, maybe Harriet Tubman is coming, you know, you know, in the next night or two to help them escape to freedom. So just like that, the ingenuity of the African kicks in, And these South African miners begin to communicate by tapping on their boots. Sometimes they were actually chained together, and they would maybe rattle their chain. So that is how the dance starts. It starts as a way of them communicating with each other through tapping on the boots, maybe a clapping of the hand. So the story goes that during their off time, they would still continue to practice this form of communication, maybe tapping on the boots, kind of like wasting time, you know.
Yeah.
And it actually becomes popular in South Africa. It becomes a kind of like a dance craze. I don't know if it was a dance craze. I don't want to kind of frame it like it was the twist.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Or what's the little floss dance the children do? I'm not framing it like that. I'm just saying it became very popular. Now, when you see the Gumboot dance, there is no denying that the roots of black fraternal and sororital, is that right? It may not be right. I don't know if that's a
Black
word.
fraternity and sorority.
So it is no doubt that the root of black fraternities and sororities stepping is in the Gumboot dance.
Absoluta! Absoluta! Absoluta!
All historians agree on this, right? They agree that at least the basic roots are in the Gumboot dance.
Which is crazy because, you know, I stepped all the time and had no idea that there was this connection.
Yes,
No idea.
Yes.
You just thought stepping was always a part of it.
I didn't really think about stepping much because I was never any good at it. I think actually during my probate, I stopped stepping. It was just like shouting people out. But so the question becomes, how did stepping go from South Africa in the 1880s to black colleges and universities, in particular black fraternities and sororities, in the 1940s? Because that's kind of where, so there's some arguments about when stepping really started. Was it some people argue that it was early as the 1920s. Some people argue that stepping really starts in the 1940s, 1950s. But either way, the question is, how did it get from South Africa
That is the question.
to black colleges and fraternities and sororities? So you want to take there are actually 3 theories on how this happened. You want to take the first theory?
So the first theory is that it came over during the transatlantic slave trade from West Africa, which doesn't really add up, you know, especially if it came about, or they're starting to see this happening on college campuses in the 1920s. You would think that you would see it in some other part of black life well before the 1920s and HBCU campuses.
Right. You would see it in the black church.
Right.
Prior to the black college campus. Right. So that theory doesn't really hold much weight. That one doesn't really hold water. Now, I can give some kind of credence to say, well, maybe some of the rhythms, some of the drum patterns, you know, from using the physical body or whatever have you, may have originated and may have just been kind of in general African thing, but to say that specifically stepping was something that came from the transatlantic slave trade, that's a nah.
Yeah.
That's a nah. So the second theory is that African Americans visited South Africa and brought stepping back to the United States. Now, this is kind of rooted in a guy named Orpheus McAdoo. McAdoo was an African American graduate of Hampton University, and he had a group called the Virginia Jubilee Singers. And they were kind of like a minstrel show, kind of like a vaudeville performance group. And they actually toured South Africa from about 1890 to 1895, which is well after the birth of the Gumboot, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So being that he was in entertainment and he may have seen the actual dance craze take place, he may have thought, hey, this is a very interesting, very creative way to dance. Let me take that back to the United States and maybe tour with that. Part of the problem with that is that once he left South Africa, yeah, he went back and forth to the United States once or twice. But once he left South Africa, he toured Europe. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, he died in Europe, right? Well, he died outside the United States. It may not have been Europe. He died outside of the United States. So to say that he had that type of influence on black colleges and fraternities and sororities in particular, I mean, it's possible, plausible,
You know.
but I wouldn't say it is as plausible as the final explanation.
So what is that?
I'm going to let you take it.
So Reuben Caluza was a South African who came to Hampton University in 1930.
And Reuben was at an HBCU, so he had a strong college connection. On top of that, Reuben formed a quartet with 3 other South African students, and they went around doing what? Singing and doing traditional Zulu dances. Now, traditional Zulu dances may not be Gumboot, but with Caluza actually having a connection to a campus, being on a HBCU, being at an HBCU, I apologize, being at an HBCU, having a connection to the college campuses, and performing possibly, it's unsure, but possibly the Gumboot dance. It seems more plausible that we can look at Caluza as the individual that introduces stepping. Now, this is written of in the book on stepping, and it seems to be the most plausible idea. And not to say that, and let's not be confused, like Caluza actually became pretty famous. He performed for Franklin Roosevelt, for the President of the United States.
Big.
Yeah, he was pretty big, touring up and down the East Coast. And if you know anything about the United States, you know that there are a gang of HBCUs on the East Coast, including the Mecca Howard University, right? So he toured up and down the East Coast with this quartet, doing singing and traditional Zulu dances. Again, we're unsure if it was the Gumboot, but it is more plausible that this is where the Gumboot stepping connection takes place.
So keep in mind that it could have been Caluza alone, or it could have been a combination of other African students that came to HBCUs because they couldn't go to what we call PWIs, predominantly white institutions at the time. So there were hundreds
predominantly whack. Shout out to the HBCUs. Yeah, so that's possible. Keep in mind that the connection between Africa and black fraternities is kind of strong. So my fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma, and I'm just going to do this flat out, shout out to my fraternity. Phi Beta Sigma actually boasts some pretty important African leaders as members. Kwame Nkrumah, yes, Kwame Nkrumah, is a member of Phi Beta Sigma, and here is a picture of him with his frat brothers, who happen to be my frat brothers. William Tolbert and William Tubman, both presidents of Liberia, were also members of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, as well as Benjamin Azikiwe, the first president of Nigeria, is also a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. My fraternity was the first black fraternity to establish chapters in Africa. So,
Well, shout out to Phi Beta Sigma.
go mob.
Go ahead.
Go mob. Yes. And for those who don't know what go mob means, join Phi Beta Sigma fraternity and you will learn. You will learn.
Yeah, I mean, stepping has gone way past the college campus. It's churches have step teams, high schools have step teams now.
Right.
They just have community step teams. Like
Right.
it's blown up. It's blown up. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. So there you have it. The strange and interesting connection between South African coal miners and Black Greek letter organizations, aka fraternities and sororities. Stepping. Stepping is an African, I guess it's a tradition or an African dance, South African dance that made its way all the way to the U.S. And now we go around stepping every chance we get. Every chance we get.
All these connections.
That's crazy.
This is really cool.
It is crazy. Shout out to the cultural connections between South Africa and
Yeah.
African Americans. And believe you me, we have much, much more. So make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. If you get a chance, please share this video and tell your family and friends about this channel, because we have a lot more interesting connections between South Africa, African Americans, and Africans in the diaspora. So, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
That's it. Well,
Thanks for joining.
outro.